Welcome to My Journey in Clay, where we talk about all things pottery related. Today I want to talk about some tips and some techniques that I've learned over the years about hand building. When I talk about hand building, or for this lesson, we're going to be talking about building with flat slabs of clay. So the first part will be, how do we get these flat slabs of clay? I'm going to show you 3 different techniques that I use to get a flat slab of clay. For all of them, to start, you're going to get some wire if you have it. In this case, I have fishing wire. Fishing wire attached to, well, these aren't dowels. These are actually a broken clothespin, but use this to cut the clay. So to start, you want to cut your clay whatever size seems to work for you. This is about a 1/2 inch or so. Depends on the shape of your clay too. So I am going to cut 2 more of these so that we have 3 slabs of clay, and then we will go over the 3 different methods that you can use to roll your clay out. And remember, these are methods that I've used. It doesn't mean that they are the only way, but these are methods that I found that work for me. First method is simply using a rolling pin. This is a standard kitchen rolling pin. You can get larger ones that are a little bit wider, but this is the one that I use. So the first method is just that, just use the rolling pin. And a lot of times I will first just sort of squish, not quite that much, but squish the clay down a little bit to get it started. Especially if it's thick. This isn't too thick. And then just obviously a back and forth motion. What you want to be careful of is not to push too hard when you get to the end, and you want to flip it frequently. So I will turn it over this way, roll a little bit, and then I will just do a 1/4 turn and roll it in the other direction a little bit too, and flip it over. You flip it over frequently. And again, when you're rolling, make sure you don't squish it at the end. There's a tendency to just sort of push harder when you get towards the end. But what you want to do is when you're rolling, you want to lift up just a little bit when you get to the end. You can always, if you left it too thick at one of those ends, you can always just roll it a little bit there. How thick you want your slab depends kind of on what you're making. I would say generally I use about a 1/4 inch, sometimes a little bit thicker, sometimes up to 3/8 of an inch. But a 1/4 inch is a good thing to, or good thickness to use for most hand-built items. So there we have method number 1. Method number 2 is similar. You're going to use your rolling pin. Again, I'm going to flatten it just a little bit with my hands just to get it started. And then I will go ahead and start the same way with the rolling pin. So what you do then is you get 2 sticks of equal thickness. What I have here are 2 paint stirrers made of wood so that they're the same size. And then you put the rolling pin, resting it on the wood, and just roll the same way, but it keeps the thickness even because of the wood. You still want to turn it over once or twice. And there you go. It's perfectly even. The thickness is even. This next method I actually use a lot, but it kind of depends on the clay. I haven't had as much success doing it with this clay for some reason, but I'm going to give it a try. So don't have to flatten it too much. You might just want to roll it a little bit first just to get it started. And then you're just going to sort of throw your clay down. So you can see this method works too, even thickness. Sometimes after I do that, I will still roll it a little bit with the rolling pin, but it really depends on the clay. Sometimes it's just fine, just like this. Once you've rolled your clay into slabs, how do you store it? This is my method. I have just a piece of wood that I have covered with black plastic trash bag. I put a piece of newspaper down on top of this. Then I'll take my slab that I've rolled, place it on top of the newspaper. The next slab I roll, I'll put another layer of newspaper, put the slab on top of that, another layer of newspaper, put the next slab on top of that. Once I'm done, I can probably get 4, maybe 5. I usually keep it to about 4 large slabs of clay on this. Then I will wrap the plastic around and put the entire board inside of another trash bag and store it like that. It will keep for quite a while like that if you cover it in plastic. You can, if you keep it overnight, it really doesn't harden very much. I would say, off the top of my head, it'd be about a 4 to 5 days if you keep it tightly covered in plastic before you would even need to check it. Sometimes even a week or so. Once you have your clay rolled out, the next thing you face is, when do I start building with it? When do I start cutting it? How hard should it be? And that's not always an easy thing to ascertain, but I'm going to show you 3 examples here. One where the clay is really a little bit too hard, one where it's too soft or can be too soft, and the other where it's generally just right for hand building. This piece here is too hard. I'm going to show you, I'm going to try to gently bend it. You can see it doesn't have much give. And if I'm going to try to attach this, you can see I'm going to scratch it. And you can see it just sort of comes off a little bit in dried pieces here. And then even though I might scratch this other piece, I would do my slip to join. And it might even, join. It seems that it is joining fine. But what will happen with this, or let me rephrase that, what can happen with this? Sometimes you can kind of force it even though the clay is a little bit too hard. But other times what happens is it appears to be a good bond, but then once it dries, or even once it gets fired, it will have a tendency to come apart. So this is a little bit too hard. This is not this one, but this one. This is a little too soft. You can see I can bend it easy. I can scratch and join these 2 pieces. And also you'll see when I do scratch this, the little crumbles sort of stick into the scratcher rather than falling off into dried pieces. When I scratch and put the slip on and attach these 2 pieces, since they are a little bit too soft, they just don't hold their shape as well. You can see that it's just not as rigid and straight as it should be. This is the consistency that I like to use. It still has some flexibility, but it's not as floppy as that soft clay was. I'll scratch and put some slip to join these two pieces together. You can see that it holds its shape much better than the softer clay. Once you have your slabs of clay rolled, the next step would be to put your pattern pieces on here if you're cutting from a pattern, and cut the pieces out. Or if you're not cutting from a pattern, still you want to cut your pieces out. So just a couple little things to think about here. You can use a clay tool and a cutting knife. You can use an X-Acto knife. They both work fine. When you cut, you just want to think about cutting straight down so that you're not going this way or that way, but cutting straight down. I usually go a little further beyond where the pattern piece is, just helps to make a sharper line. And when I'm cutting down here, you can see I have my thumb placed at the end of the clay. That is to keep that bottom piece from stretching out a little bit. So same thing. The next step would be joining your pieces. When you join your pieces, I usually bevel them. To bevel them, in the past, I used a tool like this, which is a basic pottery ribbon tool. And then at some point, I decided to just get this tool. I'll put the link in the comments below. It makes a perfect 45-degree angle, and it's helped to get some exactness to my pieces. And so for this, we just go along the edge. It makes a great bevel. Also, when I'm beveling, I find that if I try to use my left hand, I just don't hold my hand as steady. So I use my, if I have to turn the piece around to do it from the right, that's what I'll do. So to join these pieces, obviously we're going to scratch. It's always scratch, scratch and slip, scratch and slip. You can also use cider vinegar. That is what I always used in the past. Cider vinegar is supposed to have a chemical reaction with the clay that makes a better bond. It works. I don't know if it works as well or better than slip, but the slip is easy to use, and I've just ended up being fine with the slip. So slip one piece depending on how hard or soft your clay is. This clay is a very good consistency. I've beveled both sides and then just join the two pieces. This makes a really good seam here. When you bevel the two pieces, they fit together just right. I'll show you the inside here. And the outside, of course, you just go over and over with your thumb, or you can also use a tool if you find that more convenient. One other thing, well, probably more than one, but when you're joining two pieces like this, you, as much as possible, you want to coil. You want to coil where the pieces are joined. Sometimes I will put a little more slip on. Other times, not so much. Depends on how soft or hard the clay is that you're working with and how long it's been since you've joined the pieces. You want to use soft clay to coil, and for coiling, you just put it in there. I will frequently use a little tool to press it into the seam for starters. Once it's pressed into the seam, then I'll use my finger to smooth the edges. I go along each side And also you'll see I don't know if you can see, but I'm holding the back here to keep that from distorting. And then I just go over and over the seam until it smooths out. Sometimes I'll use the back of my finger to make it smooth along the edges where it's joined. Another thing that you might do, depending on your piece, is you might want to put a little bit extra here at the top or the bottom. Those are the two places where it's going to have a tendency to separate. So there we go. I could go over and over this a little bit more to get it a little bit smoother, but that's the basic technique. And you do want to coil. Sometimes it is difficult to get down inside your piece if you have a tall piece or a narrow piece, but try to coil anytime that you can because it does lend strength to the piece. One last tip I want to give you when you're hand building is after you are all done, cover it up with plastic, let it sit overnight or at least a couple hours, and then come look at it again. Because I have found, like, I think everything is smooth. I've gone over and over and over it. It looks good, but sometimes you get to the point where you don't see things. So it's really a good practice to just let it sit overnight, then take another look at it and smooth it and fix it again, just to make sure that you've got everything joined, there's no seams showing, that the coils are all good. Okay, thanks for watching.